Hi, this is Dr. Angela with the Lifestyle MD. I am so excited to introduce you to Maria Zimmer. She is one of my patients. She has really been instrumental in helping to give some real life perspective on the impact on stress and all of the soft things that people tend to neglect in terms of their well being and understanding how to alter that for the better of her health. So I'm going to allow Maria to tell us a little bit about herself, and then we'll get into a little back and forth, little dialogue. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. Hi, everyone. I am Maria. And like Dr. Angela said, I am one of her patients, and she's been very instrumental on my journey just from internalized stress and burnout into kind of redefining my own reality and resetting back my equilibrium. So, I guess a little bit about my story. 2 years ago, I ended up leaving a really high stress, high demand job in corporate consulting after having a lot of really scary, unusual things happening with my health as a part of internalized stress. These past few years have been really intentional on understanding how stress shows up in the body, working with my nervous system, and shifting my own identity around what it means to be a productive person and a contributing member of society, but also what it means to take care of myself and how to enable myself to do more with less, but also listening to some of those nudges inside of myself too.
Very powerful. So, the first time you and I really talked, you told me about your transformation, how you had started off when you were working in industry and you were experiencing a lot of this internalized stress, and how you were doing all the right things. Like people will say, like, I was doing the exercise and I was eating right, and you didn't feel well. You were having a lot of allergic type reactions. And on top of that, you were having a hard time getting the weight off.
Hmm.
So, where do you wanna start with that? I want people to understand where you were then, and what was that aha moment for you, like, where you realized what it was and what you had to do different. Let's start there.
I think a really good place to start is I've always kind of identified as a really productive person, right? I've always cared a lot about my active contribution, like my career, the way in which my involvement opened certain doors. I feel like a lot of my life was very strategic and enabled by what I knew would bring me different levels of success
Mm.
and what would align me with happiness or material goods or whatever that was kind of a little bit more of what I had saw as a successful life for me. And so it really started back in, I think at the very beginning. I was always kind of like, I'm going to be a really good student. I'm going to socialize. I'm going to spend my breaks really well. I'm going to be traveling on the weekends. I'm going to be optimizing life in a lot of different ways. And I think for a while, there was this inclination to do more, to add more. I think when I started enjoying a job that worked really well and looked good on paper, there was like a part of me that I felt was missing a little bit. I think it was really kind of tuning into those signs and that inner knowing that, like, okay, maybe I'm doing all the right things. And maybe the things that I'm doing because other people told me were the right things to do, like maybe they're not actually for me. And I'll admit, it took me like 2 years to come to that.
Mm.
And it was one of these things where I had like a multi-person care team with like my primary care. I had my therapist. I had a few other people kind of going through this seemingly long, normal process of like, okay, you're gaining weight. Maybe you should start working out more. And so I'm like, okay, I'm doing yoga. I'll do hits. I'll get into spin classes. I'll add this into my day around work. I'll try to not be so stagnant. There was kind of this like endless loop of being like, okay, you're gaining weight. You're doing these certain things, but your markers are going up, like my
Mm.
triglycerides are off the chart. And I'm like, I'm doing what I can. And so I
Mm.
think it took this really long time of me trying to be like, okay, no, let's like throw another dart at the wall. Let's try to figure this out. Like maybe I need to write longer gratitude lists in the morning.
More,
God,
do more.
yeah, like I
Yeah.
constantly have this desire. I'm like, I'm missing something. Like, what is it that I'm not
Mhm.
adding in? And then I think it came to a point where I started internalized stress can show up in a lot of different ways. And for me, I would like randomly started fainting. The trouble with like fainting because internalized stress and because of those activities is because it doesn't happen when you're in peak stress.
Mm.
So it would happen like the week after exam week or after a big week at the client, whatever that was, I'd be kind of in this like getting back to like homeostasis or just kind of this good equilibrium on the weekend. And I would have these random things where I'd like faint or I'd have
Mm.
panic attacks.
That's something there that I think a lot of people don't necessarily always recognize. You said that these episodes or these symptoms didn't happen during the peak times of stress, right?
Mm,
They happened sometimes separate, right?
and often days.
In
Like
days. Yes.
it'd be like, okay, I'm
Yes.
on the up now. What was that? I felt like I was maybe on per se. I'm hitting all the balls out of my court. I'm doing the thing. I feel like
Uh-huh.
I'm getting the awards. I'm going above and beyond on projects for clients. There's all this applaud. But then on the other side, it would be like come Saturday or come Sunday or come that weekend trip with friends, or I would come home for the holidays and see my family and break out in hives, like
Mm.
all over my body. And I'd be like, I don't know what this is. And so we'd go down this other rabbit hole of like, oh, I'm allergic to something.
So, I mean, I've seen this play out in my life and I've seen it play out in the lives of many patients. And you're the first patient who I have ever actually encountered who has made the connection themselves, though. Most people think when I'm stressed, I'm really going to feel it. And if I'm having a panic attack, it's going to happen when I'm stressed, not when I'm sitting and relaxing on the couch and I'm having a panic attack. It must be something else going on.
Mhm.
And I think back to how I would frequently get sick like, right at the beginning of a vacation or time away from work.
Yes. All the
Yes.
time.
I'm like, "What? I get to rest and I'm sick."
No, and you're like, "Is, like, something wrong with me?" Because 'Cause you're like, "Okay,
Mhm.
like, this is the thing, like, this is the activity, this is the connection, this is the" whatever that weekend or activity was, you'd be like, "Okay, this is the thing," that you're kind of depleted. Like, you're going
Yes.
into it knowing that it's gonna fill you up, and then you kind of, like, reach your depths while you're there, and you're
Yes.
like, "What is that?" Because I was doing the right things.
Right. And if you haven't made the connection between the internalized stress, the chronic internalized stress furthermore, and the impact that it has on your whole body, you can completely miss it. So I'm gonna talk about like big
Mhm,
picture wise the toll of chronic stress. I mean, this has been demonstrated in case reports, scientific studies across the board, and then anecdotally. So inflammation, we know that chronic stress promotes inflammation. We know that your immune system is suppressed because of chronic stress. No surprise there. You get sick often, right? Developing new allergies, reacting to things in foods and environmental things that you never reacted to before and developing these new symptoms, brain changes. So, memory and learning can be compromised, prefrontal cortex. So, that overload where decision making, emotional control, people are like, I can't focus. I can't do all these things. And it's kind of a new symptom. Well, it could be a problem with chronic stress and being more sensitive to stress. And so the amygdala, my favorite objective thing to measure that is heart rate variability. So your
mhm.
body's resilience to stress can be reflected in that heart rate variability. And so that's a concrete way to look at that. And just some other ways, cardiovascular system, your digestive system, mental health, metabolic health, the likelihood that you're going to have diabetes and increased insulin resistance. There is not a part of you that is not touched,
Mm,
right? And it might be a little bit different for everyone. Almost everyone's gonna experience some form of stress, anxiety, mental health related stuff, but for some people, it might be the insulin resistance they can't get under control, the weight that they can't get under control, the tachycardia and all the heart rate stuff that they're struggling with, the symptoms like fainting, hypotension, drop, all of that. At what point did you say to yourself, "I think I'm doing too much?"
Think when I physically couldn't do anything more.
You had to hit rock bottom.
Yeah, and I think, like, labeling it as rock bottom was really powerful because, I mean, like, a lot of the things that you just mentioned, I mean, it could be anything. Like, you're gaining weight,
Mhm.
you're pre-diabetic, you gotta eat better food, whatever. Didn't feel super clear on what it was or what was happening. It just kinda felt like I was broken in a way. I fainted really hard, I hit my head, and I think,
Mm,
like, if you've ever fainted before, it feels like you're dying. After you
yes.
wake up, after you fainted, you might be in
Mm,
purgatory, you might be in heaven. You don't know where you are. You're so
mhm.
disoriented. And so I think it was like a few of those weekends and just like growing in a way that I've stopped recognizing myself. And I think when I
Mm,
looked in the eyes of myself, I was like, okay, I have to do something different. And
mm,
so coming and like putting a label on it and being like, this is my rock bottom. Like, I don't have a
mm,
lot of energy to leave this place right now and where I'm at, but this is as far as I'm willing to go. And I think
mm,
that was really important to me. And I think from there, I was able to start to analyze what are the things in rock bottom that are helping me and what are the things that I don't like and what are really hindering me. Because I think from being in a spot where you're completely beside yourself, you have no energy, you feel like you've done everything you can and you're in the wrong rooms. I think observation and tuning in was the first thing that I needed to do, and
mm.
understanding that rock bottom can be a really insightful place.
It may seem like the worst place that you can be at the time, but I have seen the biggest, most productive transformations after someone reaches rock bottom.
I believe that. I mean, it's the same way if you're like swimming and you hit the bottom of the water, you can bounce off that ground. Sometimes it's hard to get to the depth. Once you're
Mhm.
there, you know exactly which way is the opposite. And
And if
like,
radical transformation is needed, it's human nature to not want to change, right? And to
yeah,
resist change. But when you have no other direction to go, that's a good time for it to happen. When I tell my patients the stuff that I tell them, they think I'm blowing smoke. This isn't just all intellectual. I'm not reading this just in books. I'm like, I'm experiencing it firsthand and then telling you how to apply it in your situation. For our listeners, tell them what your life was like as you were going through this chronic stress over those 2 years. You were in a corporate job. You were, by all accounts, from the outside looking in, very successful in your career, but thriving career-wise. What was your day-to-day, and what was your life like at that point when things weren't going as well and heading down?
it's crazy because I feel like work took the longest time to notice an impact. My output for my career and the things that I was doing, like that came top of priority, I think.
Mm,
So I had really high output for a while initially in my corporate area and just my own contribution. But then once I'd log off the workday, I'd have absolutely nothing left. Or
mm,
I'd like travel to the client for a week.
mm,
And I would have the hardest time, like, pulling myself out of bed on the weekends or just trying
mm,
to get myself to feel, I'm living the dream, the thing I had described that I wanted. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I just need to be more grateful. I need to figure out a way to make this work for me because it's working for so many other people. I think, especially when it comes to a career, like there's so much identity in it. And I think like especially it was like these were my first couple years out of college. And so whenever I would consider even analyzing my options, it felt like if I was to consider something different, I was just throwing away the past 10 years of effort. I was feeling like wasn't having fun in my job, but it was also like a time where I'd tell it to people and they're like, yeah, nobody has fun in this. I'm in an industry that everybody loves on the outside. It looks so sexy on your resume. It gets you
mm,
into doors. But when you're in there and you raise the red flag, everyone's like, well, honey, all the red flags are already up. Like, what haven't you noticed? And
mm.
so it was one of those things where I was like, oh, I've really got to recenter and realign on this.
Yes, everything that you said, kind of the expectations of the outside world, the internalized expectations on what you're supposed to be doing and how you're supposed to be doing it. And would you agree that you were a perfectionist type A?
100%. 1000%. Yes. I've always cared about the things that have my name on it. If I'm going to be a
Mm,
part of something, I'm going to put my heart, my soul, everything I have into it.
mm,
But then I'd notice like the perfectionist too would get like more rigid. Like when things wouldn't go
mm,
my way outside of work or just little, like a drop of salad dressing on the ground, it'd be like my whole day is ruined. Like I was almost like feeling like hot
mm.
in my emotional state, but for other things and smaller
Yeah.
things, but then almost like numb to other things too at the same time. And you're like, it was different. But yet, like, you're
Mhm.
still getting those like applauses. Yeah, everyone's putting their head down, but like, you kind of like try to gloss over a month or two. You like just push through the work days and the weeks and that. And you're like, okay, well, next weekend I'll be able to feel a little bit more like myself. Or
Mhm.
there's this one event or certain things like that. And I think it was kind of this constant pushing it back and being like, oh, if I'm feeling this way, everybody feels this way to the same degree. And to a degree, yeah, it is. I think in some of those rooms, it is a little bit
Kind of it's
normalized. Like,
normalized, right, but that doesn't
and
make it
it's
correct or
no, but
healthy in
it's
any
also
way.
everyone's got that same narrative of they have to do this. And if they
Mm,
don't do it well, they're a terrible person or it
yes,
hits their identity or it all goes so straight into these knives to itself, into each other. And so
and it's hard to
I,
see yourself any differently when everyone around you is echoing that same sort of thing. I mean, the same can be said, I think, for medicine,
mm,
where when you're in rooms or working among other physicians, you're all just like, "This is just what we do. This is how we do it. This is, this is how we function. We only have 15 minutes, but that's the expectation. What am I gonna do about it?" And you have to be able to see yourself through a different light and recognize that the narrative that you're being sold is a false narrative, right? And you did get to that point, right? I'm curious to know if any of the physicians in your care team had anything to do with it. Did anyone at any point have any nuggets or advice or kind of speak into the fact that your chronic stress and the internalization of that stress was having a big impact on your health? And that might be part of it.
it was always like a part of the equation. I
Mm,
think for me, it didn't quite feel like the probable
mm,
like the reason. Like, I think like I was honest when I would talk to them about like how I felt about work, but I think like some of these things they'd look at my blood work, we'd try to figure out other sort of things. I think
mm,
especially as I went down the journey longer and months of blood work and tests and analysis and getting to this fork of they're like, okay, you either have a brain tumor or it's that freaking job, Maria. And you're like,
mm,
you should listen. And so you end up going to all these other specialists. I found a lot of benefit from somatic therapy. I had a therapist that was so helpful in helping understand how stress was being internalized in my body. And
mm,
so I think for a while I was like, it's not stress. Like, this is just who I am. Like, I'm a productive person and I like to have the colors clean and like I do all these things. I didn't realize the degree of like what maybe that tension was. Or I'd mentioned that I'd wake up sometimes and my arms would be asleep or my jaw was really tight. And I'd be like, oh, these are just other things. And so
mm,
I think almost like weaving in these other observances as I was going through this long journey with them, they were like, hey, these things that you're mentioning casually, like they really line up
mm.
and they make a difference. And so I think that 100%. Like, if I didn't have a care team that was credible and knowledgeable and being like, hey, no, stress can kill you. These
Literally.
things, like, you are dying and like you're having these things happen to you because of
Yeah.
stress. And I wouldn't have never assumed that, like I
Wow.
probably would have tried to correct my thoughts away from that, being like, that
Mm,
doesn't happen to anybody. Or if that did
mm,
happen, there'd be so many other people out with this. I think I needed somebody to tell me what it
mhm.
was. I think I needed also my life partner, Albert, to be able to be like, hey, I do think that is something to explore. And it doesn't make you think differently on yourself and it doesn't change the way that you are, but you deserve to know what that is and you deserve to feel better. Cause I think like there's this through this whole journey, it's like you're doing the right things, but there's a part of it where you're like, yeah, the joy or the excitement will come later. And I
Mm,
think it takes people in your life being like, hey, I haven't seen you feel like yourself for a really long time.
wow. And that
And I,
hits different when people start telling you that on the outside.
yeah, you know how much your energy and your life
Mm,
impacts other people. And you're like, oh my
mm,
gosh, like I can't keep going down this if
mm,
it's impacting other people and you're noticing it so clearly. I
mhm,
think it is almost one of those things that I felt like someone had to hold a mirror up to me to
mm.
and clearly show the areas where the stress was showing up to be like, "Oh my gosh, that is that."
Do you feel like you had to go through almost like these checkpoints before you could see that? Because I feel like in the beginning of a journey like that, someone's not likely to receive that information or take that in as reality. And you kinda have to pass through a few checkpoints where you're like, "Okay, I believe it now. I get it. I see it. Yes, I understand."
1000%. I mean, this has been like a multi-year long journey here. I think it takes years almost. And
Yes.
I don't want to say that from a spot of deterring somebody, but as much as it takes years to become who you are and to figure out your way of existing, I think
Mm,
you can accidentally define some of these behaviors or traits or things as just a competitive edge. And it might be a competitive edge, but that edge is hurting you in so many more
yes.
deeper ways.
And it sounds like so much of your existence, and you mentioned it earlier, was focused on your career. You
Mhm.
were putting your energy into all of that at your own peril. That was the objective. That was the goal. That's what I'm going to focus on. And taking care of yourself, and that, self care is a thing. I don't like throwing it around so easily. And I would say it's so much more than just a spa day, right? Not doing things that are going to be to your detriment and making decisions. So, let's say one example I might give is working long hours continuously and having, someone who maybe their job is really important. They're working like 12-hour days, 7 days a week because they feel like they have to in order to be successful. But to what end? Because you're
Mhm.
not having life, you're not having quality of life, and you're causing harm to your health, as an example. So, what did you do to cut out that chronic stress, to separate yourself from the internalization of the stress?
I think it was first acknowledging it and recognizing where it was coming from. And I think from there, it was having a lot of really hard conversations with
Mm,
myself. There's an internal dialogue that has to be had when you're almost like spending your life living someone else's pursuit or doing something you feel like you need to be doing. I think there was a point where I was like, life isn't worth dying over. And it just felt like I was experiencing my own death in slow ways. I lose my personality. And then I kind of lost my desire to do the weekends. And then the Pilates class or the yoga class that I was going to because I loved it was just a thing to kind of get me up from red to yellow, on my
mm,
battery. And so it felt like there was a point where I was like, you know what? Like, let me just lay my cards out. Like,
mm,
done this. Let me analyze and be like, if I changed all of this, what would it look like? I think it's like
mm.
knowing you're at rock bottom, right? Like, you got to like
Yeah.
dream a little big and you're like,
Yeah.
say I acknowledge the fear and put it on the back burner. What does that look like?
Uh-huh.
Like, what are the nudges in my head saying? Like, what do I feel like I'm getting called to do or away from?
Mhm.
And I think like allowing that dialogue to take place and to listen to it and not be like, oh, this is just me being unproductive or ungrateful or just not able to live in this certain reality and finding another excuse to choose something different, but truly
Mhm.
like a time of getting to know myself in a way that I never had the opportunity to before.
Do you think that you were afraid of failure and that played a role in it being hard for you to accept this reality for a while?
100%. I wore busy like a badge, Like I
Mm,
loved my long days. I felt like I had greater value as a
mm.
being when I laid it all out, Like the days where I hit 40 hours by Wednesday, I was like, damn, we're doing it. And then it's like, no, like there may be applause and awards and certain things in other rooms, but for what?
You mentioned somatic therapy. Tell me more about that. I'm not familiar.
So I got introduced to somatic therapy because I took a leave of absence as a part of like my whole journey
Oh, that's a good
with,
thing.
oh yeah, but it's one of those things that you say and it sounds so salty or sour. Like
Mhm.
it feels weird. Took a leave of
Mhm.
absence as a
'Cause
requirement.
it makes you feel weak and you feel like you look weak to other people, right?
Hmm. And you get
That's
that. Or
not
like,
fair. How do you do that?
yeah. And you're like, I hate just had to get to rock bottom, honey. Like, follow me
Yeah.
here. Um,
This can happen
no.
to you too.
Right, right. Somatic therapy. So I got aligned with a therapist, and I think therapy is like dating. You got
Mhm.
to find a few different ones, and it's a journey, right? I think one of the main allures for me was that I had to, as a part of my leave of absence, but I also had like a deep knowing that I had some knots that I wanted to untangle. And
Mhm.
so I happened to just, was the part of you try one therapist and you're like, yeah, not so good. Let me try another. I tried this one, and her specialty was a little bit more somatic therapy. And so for me and for her, and like that can look up, it can look in so many different ways, but somatic therapy is a little bit of talk therapy, but it's also combined with, it's almost like a meditation but almost
Mm.
like tuning into the ways that things are internalized in your own body. And
Oh.
so it was so beneficial to me because, like, we'd have
Oh.
like a long conversation. We would do traditional talk therapy, we'd discuss things. And then there'd be a point, maybe like halfway through, where we kind of like shift in. And when we're talking about things, we understand like where it shows up in the body. And for me, it'd be like, and it would show up in different ways. It's always a knot in your stomach, but sometimes it's your jaw, it's your fists. I think as you further analyze where feelings are held in the body,
Mm.
we know this, but we don't know how to access them. And we're like, oh yeah, that's why my hips are so tight. Somatic therapy was more of a guided meditation and a guided journey into being able to understand some of those sensitive points and some of those touchy areas. You've received bad information, your shoulders tense up, they drop. Something happens, like clench your. There's these micro things that we
Yeah.
do and we have a response to. It's a natural part of our system to respond to things in our body. It's the process of understanding and exploring what those are.
That is incredibly powerful.
And I think it was so beneficial for me in particular with internalized stress because I didn't know some of those cues or I didn't know what that felt like. Like, I felt my stomach hurt before a big day.
Mm.
I would hear from my dentist that like I'm clenching my jaw at night more. And that wasn't a thing that was happening. But I think sometimes the body responds to things, and I think our mind is also responding. But sometimes the most direct way to understand how something is being received is through exploring how it lands in the body. And so in those moments where I'd get stressed or I'd tighten up, even now, I use that physical knowing almost as a barometer on how I'm feeling because I
Mm.
don't know sometimes what it's caused from, but you notice tense, you notice stress, you notice certain things. And I think like there's a benefit to kind of steering your mind away from noticing those things. And then there's a degree of turning in and being like, okay, what is that? Let me analyze this. Because, I mean, you hear movement and yoga and so many of these other things are so good to physically get stuff out of your body. But I think sometimes people have a hard week and they're like, I got to go hit a punching bag. And it's like, okay, yeah, absolutely do that. But also understand where that tension came from throughout
Mm.
where did you notice that arise? Why, like, what were those moments? What was your internal dialogue when you're feeling like you're in a space where there's not good alignment? Like, you don't realize
Mm.
that narratives that we have in our mind is like, that's the narration of our life.
Yes.
Sometimes these thoughts that we have around
Yes.
productivity or busyness or our own identity can be doing so much more harm than good.
And I've used this with some people. And when I did coaching, thoughts lead to feelings, and then feelings lead to action or inaction, right? So when you have a reaction to something, or maybe you're avoiding things or avoiding calling someone, what are the thoughts reflecting and actually trying to dig into that? Because most of us don't have conscious awareness of the thoughts and the feelings that we're generating, but they are driving everything that's happening to us physically and driving our action or inaction.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes before even like starting dialogue on what those thoughts are, you don't know how much they delineate from what other people are hearing as their narration to life. Like that voice in your head can be a lot more negative if you don't
Yes.
actually vocalize where some of that is coming from or what that internal narration is. At least for me, something that's been really beneficial is journaling and writing out some of those thoughts and understanding where the root of that came from. We act in a way because of our belief systems and things that
Yes.
we've internalized.
And I mean, your belief about yourself could be that you're not good enough, right? And in the recycling of that belief, it's going to lead to thoughts of like, well, I've got to work harder or I've got to do these things to prove myself. You ended up doing something that I actually often recommend to people. You left your job.
Yeah. It was, oh my gosh, I thought it was ruining my life at that time. We're about 2 years since then. Yeah. I sent an email on a Monday morning after I made the decision. I quit. And then I got on a one-way flight out of the country and started a healing.
So,
Once I put my notice in, they were going to fire me because I was on the bench between projects. But I was like,
mm,
I had a goal. I was going to be there for 3 years. And I
mm,
got there and on the day of my third year, I was like,
mm,
what? This is it. But it was so much friction once I decided that. I needed to leave the job that I had just spent the last 10 years aligning for, preparing for, being excited about, being proudly representative of. It felt like I was beside myself and throwing away everything. And so I quit and I didn't really tell anybody. My parents, I told them that I could keep the job when I was going to be in Europe.
Mm,
And I mean, we were at this point where like a couple people at the firm that I worked at, I would share, like, okay, I'm moving out of Colorado. And so I was like, if this job, like if my therapist, my care team, my specialists are right, and that the reason I'm having so many of these problems is because of this job, then I need to leave.
mm,
And I think for that, I was like, well, if I'm going to leave, I need to figure out a new situation for me to just be. Because
mm,
if this is an internalized stress thing, I've got to figure out a way to hold space
mm,
to heal from that, but also allow it to undo itself, right?
yeah,
And so, as a part of leaving the job and leaving the life and leaving so many of these systems and approaches that just weren't working for us, we ended up getting rid of almost all of our belongings. We
mm,
really threw it up in the air and we're like, okay, we're going to leave Denver. We're going to leave this job. We're going to kind of leave a lot of these things behind. The thought of consumption or the thought of busyness, the urge to constantly be doing more and being more and seeing more, like it had to be left behind. And so we ended
mm,
up minimizing our house from like a 1,200 square foot house into this like 6 by 7 square foot pod, which really just had like our bikes and some clothes and some things in it. And we took a flight out of the country and we went to Portugal for 3 months. We did Montenegro and Croatia for 2 months. We really just allowed ourselves to
mm.
be. And I understand this is such a privileged perspective to have.
No, this is not something that everyone's gonna be able to do, so I do
No.
wanna be clear. I recognize as we're having at this conversation, this is your reality, but the nuts and bolts of it are true for everyone, is being able to recognize when the patterns of your behaviors and what you're doing in your day-to-day life are causing you harm. For some people, that could look like walking away from a job. For some people, it might just be about creating better boundaries if
Mhm.
you can in the job that you have. And I've had some patients who've done that where I've said, stop going overboard. If you're not asked to do it, don't do it. Because what is the benefit to you? You're not getting raises. You're not, you're not being promoted. Just try it out and see what happens. And, for that particular person, that was what she needed to give her some peace. And, I don't want people to think that I took a leave of absence of 3 months. I didn't go travel, but
Mhm.
that leave of absence was the clarity that I needed. I think everyone needs to have some time to step away. You can't make a decision in the middle of it. It's hard to see clearly because you're in survival mode. You need to get out of that for a little bit. And I think that's what that did for you. You got out of survival mode in the most significant way you could. And I remember Albert was working with me, helping me with branding. And he said he was leaving to go to Europe. And I was like, you're doing what? I was like, you're coming back, right?
You're like, of course.
Tell us about that.
I read this quote the other day. It was like, I got to shift from being like a human doing into just a human being. It was so beneficial to slow down and to just observe things and be exposed to a slightly slower, different way of life. It was so beneficial to kind of quiet the noise and to strip back to the basics. I think as a part of also quitting, it was like, okay, what can I do consistently while I'm here that helps me pour into myself, but allow myself to figure it out as I
Right.
go? And so it was a time of like really observing. It was writing. It was taking daily walks. And I will stand by this now. There is nothing, I think, more impactful for me in this journey than getting 7,000 steps a day, every day, and going outside for at least a little bit.
The
I've always
outside part,
huge. You just hear
huge.
the bird song, the rivers, whatever it is. And it's something that also, like, especially when you're burnt out and in my healing journey, I feel like meditation is really impactful. But when you're somebody who's always doing so many different things at once, sitting down and trying to remove all thoughts from your brain is impossible.
Yeah.
S- Supporting yourself through a long walk where you take your headphones out and listen to the bird song and are out in nature, that is one of the fastest way to kind of quiet your thoughts, to tune in and to really have like a walking meditation. If there's like a big day of whatever it is, you're going to see me walk around the block because
Mm,
it's just one of those things that's always so available to me. And it's powerful in that. Like, I think it allowed me to strip back into some of those core things that really helped. But then also, like, there's people that are doing life at a different pace. And I think sometimes it takes you slowing down just a little bit to be able to lock eyes with them.
yes.
There are so many good, wonderful, incredible moments in life. And I think
Yes.
sometimes we can come to glorify the big, flashy things or the ones that everyone
Yes.
else is super applauding over. But there's nothing more joyous to me than watching a bird murmuration. You know, when the birds dance together outside,
Yes.
just tuning in and being able to
Yes.
slow down. So impactful.
I've run way less than I used to because my old joints don't let me. But running, walking, run walking, whatever that is, I used to always listen to music. And at times I will still listen to music if I want it to be really aggressive. But if I want, most of the time, it's a form of meditation for me.
Hmm.
Exercise is a form of meditation. Often I do it to no sound because I take in whatever's happening in my environment. I'm being fully present in that and in the same way. And talking about locking eyes with someone, I often think about one of the other turning points for me was sitting at my desk where I am now, and my son, he was probably, I think he was like 4 or 5 at the time, just before I made the decision to transition to being an entrepreneur. He came and sat down next to me because I would often put a chair next to me so he could sit side by side and do whatever he wanted to do while I was working at home in the evening. And one time I don't know if he had made up, and it makes me emotional think about he like he was on a laptop or a computer. And I said, "What are you doing, honey?" He's like, "Working like mommy." And I'm like, "Oh, that's it. This is not okay." That's not to say that I don't do work at home in the evening still at times, but you know what? It's so much easier for me. And I made an intentional decision long before I left, maybe like 6 months even before, that I'm gonna draw a line. I need to be present for the people in my house, in my family. I needed to sit down and lock eyes with my son. And when he's talking to me, I'm here. I'm not distracted by all these other things. I'm like, "Hey, what's up? Let's talk." And he knows that I'm present. And that can be said for so many things. We're so busy. Just go, go, go. And another thing that I wanted to share, walking is one of my favorite things to recommend too, but also when you eat. I'm really
Hmm.
bad at this. Taking time and savoring every bite and every morsel and being present with your food. Sounds crazy, but I can't tell you how many times I just go, right? And I just eat, and I'm like, "I don't even remember what I ate." Not okay. So you guys came back, but before we get to that, what was the impact on your health? How long did it take for you to see the impact on your health, and what were those changes? I know one of them is that you lost weight, so definitely talk about that. But big picture wise, I mean, big picture, what are some of the things you noticed right away?
Right away, I think it took about a month when I started to like see a sparkle in my eye again. I think like there's a depth to a pupil that comes when you're not really in a good place. And I started to
Mm,
recognize myself a bit more. That took about a month. I think a lot of the anxiety was something that went fast, kind
mm.
of like on its way out because it was really highly isolated to my career. But again, I kind of took a lot of the activations for those away when we were gone. I started to notice the smile, like this glimmer in my eye pretty quickly. But then I think
Mm,
like the internalized stress and like the physical tension in my body that started to slow and like really kind of like slowly minimize itself over the months that we were there, but truly, it's been one of those, it's a longer
mm,
process. Like, I didn't
mhm.
even recognize that weight loss was occurring. When you're overweight, you go to the doctor's appointments, like, "Yeah, you're overweight." And then you're on to the next thing, and you're like, "Okay, I've been through 3 years of trying hit workouts, all these other things." And so it was so surprising. I think
'Cause it was effortless. I mean, that's the thing
it
that
was
strikes it was
effortless.
effortless. It literally just melted away, which is
Yeah.
I think that's a really important point. Again, weight is never the thing I want people to primarily focus on, and this is an example of why. Because if you're
Mhm.
putting all your energy and effort into, "I need to lose the weight," and overlooking some of these other things, just focusing on the things that you need to do for your well-being, and for you, it was reducing the internalized stress. It was a byproduct.
Yeah. And so, I mean, just to illuminate the weight loss, I lost like 50 pounds within a year, which is crazy.
And again, no GLP-1, weren't,
No.
like, doing some crash diet,
I like
like
stopped going to all my boutique fitness classes. I wasn't pushing myself in the gym. I wasn't going to hit workouts. I wasn't in spin. I was just walking
Mhm.
and journaling and showing up for myself. And the weight loss just happened. Like
Yes.
it felt like I had been spinning my wheels. Like, I'm not going to minimize the discipline, but it's almost like
Right,
the same thing that I was doing that I'm doing now. I was doing then too, but almost at less, I'm doing less intensity now.
right.
Like maybe I'm a little bit more consistent on getting my steps on every single day. But
Mhm.
like I used to be someone who was like going for the hardest workouts multiple times a week, constantly trying to push myself to run and to really do these like high stress things. I
It's
think
no
it was
longer a chore.
really profound because now I'm just doing movement. I love my yoga. I love my walks. I get my movement through a life that I find fulfilling and enjoyable, and it's not punishment. And it was like a similar appointment when I went in and I found out I had lost 50 pounds. I was like, okay, this makes sense as to why my pants don't fit anymore. There's these other things. But then it was even like my blood work. So
Yes.
many things, like my triglycerides were really high. I was showing signs of prediabetes. I was really inflamed on all my markers. My liver wasn't doing well. I was showing a lot of stress.
You
Like
were on a path, like a really
I
bad
was,
path.
yeah, it's crazy
Yes.
because
And again, to be
see,
clear, you were eating well, you were exercising, you weren't
oh,
someone who was overindulging on delicacies of life. You were being very reasonable
yeah.
and again, didn't make a lot of dramatic changes, cut the stress. And did your markers all normalize?
Yeah, they completely normalized, and again, that took about
Mm,
a year and a half, but it wasn't like a constant effort. Like, it was more
mm,
like, "Oh, let's check this," and I was like, "Oh my gosh, Doctor
mm,
Angela, look at this." Now, even when I tell friends, I'll be like, "Oh yeah, so and so lost this certain weight," or whatever it is, people are like, "You look so much happier now than you did then," and I think, like, people now notice, like, an inner glow and, like, of course, I don't have as much acne and I
mhm.
have more energy to give and to
You're
share, and I
yourself
think
again. There's
yeah,
more
like,
of you
I
to give.
recognize me. It's a continuous journey. I mean, like, some of
Mm,
these markers are be like, "Okay, I made it to the finish line." These are great things, and they're wonderful things, but we're still on a journey. There's a future here as well that we're seeking to align for. I feel like it's one of those, messy, tangling, you're like, "Oh my gosh, if I had to go back through that again, sheesh, that's a lot." But
right.
now coming into the other side of it, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so glad that that was my battle, my uphill,
Yeah.
because it really brought me back to myself." Also, as someone who has aspirations, who wants to leave an impact.
You're better at listening to yourself, what's happening to your body, happening to your mind, how you're feeling, and you're purpose driven. It's bigger than you at the end of the day.
I'm very privileged to also work for myself and work at a creative agency that we run rather than technology consulting. But it's so much like the work that I do now, I get so much life from. It's so
Mhm.
hard to be reminded that there's a version of you that wakes up excited for the work that you get to do.
Oh,
And there's going to be a spring in your step, and there's like another side to it that
mm,
comes from it.
mm,
It's like you can live a life with a little bit more integrity and a little bit more honesty to yourself. And I think, like,
yes,
in the same way that we're unwilling to experience some of the negative, it hinders our ability to experience the positive too. And so
yes.
there's almost this like, at least I found within myself as a part of a coping mechanism or just a survival skill. Well, at my edge, I feel like I almost numbed a lot of my emotions. So the joy didn't feel as joyous, but it was in a survival attempt to make like the
Everything
sad
was
part.
dull. It wasn't
Yeah.
just one side.
Yeah. It was
Mhm.
just like, meh.
And the quality of life that you have now is so much better, right? You just feel more alive. And
Hmm.
I try to describe to people what it's like. I'm not taking grandiose vacations. I'm not doing all these glamorous things, but I've never been happier. I'm able to be more fully present. And to your point, it's a continuous work in progress because challenges don't stop coming. You're going to always come against different battles, and you're also going to have to sometimes fight your natural tendency and habits that you've spent most of your life cultivating. You're still sometimes going to have to fight against that, right?
Mhm.
What advice do you have, especially for other women who are career driven and maybe putting their health and well being on the line? And maybe they're at a point right now where they don't realize the impact that it's having on them. What would you say to them right now?
I would like to be a reminder that, I mean, we hear that the body keeps score. Also, it holds the map. It feels like so many things are piling up against you, and there's so many things that you could have done better or changed. Or I think sometimes when you're in it, you're like, I got to do more to get out of this. It's also understanding that you know what you need. We know what holds the key to making us feel a little bit better. I think, like,
Mhm.
deep down, it may take some time to clear the noise of everything else that we feel like we need to be doing. But truly, I do think if you listen in and you seek to understand what those alarms are saying when they come up, there's a lot of insight to be had there. It's hard. And I think sometimes it takes specialists to remind us or to
Mm.
validate the feeling. But if I go back and I was to see Maria 2 years ago, it wouldn't be like, oh, you need to listen to all these other people. Listen to that side of yourself that believes there's more for you. You know, that version of you that has a weekend that you feel in touch with your joy and a little bit more connected to who you used to feel like. That version's there. It may take a
Mm.
little bit more effort to come out, but she is there and
Mm.
she's worth fighting for. We're doing so much as is. So I think as a part of your pursuit to supporting yourself, don't add more to the list. Cut a few
Mm.
things off. I think right now we're recording this in January and it's like everyone's like, oh, what more things do you want to do? More, more, more. And it's like, less, but
Less.
better. Do things
Yes.
out of alignment, not just because everyone's running a marathon. Does that feel like you
Yes.
need to do that? Like, do less.
Does it align with my purpose? Is this thing in alignment, whatever that thing is? And if it's not, cut it out.
Yeah, I remember at one point in my career, I had one of those days where I looked up and I was like, I've always really admired the people I'm around and the mentors I was with. And I looked up and I was like, I don't want to be like any of you. I don't want
Yes.
that view of life. I don't want to live this sort of way. That isn't what I see as success. When I first started exploring the opportunity of career change, I work in interior plant design now, which is a completely 180. When I started meeting people in the biophilia industry and people that were kind of on that path that I felt called towards but didn't know how to get to, they felt like the fountain of youth and they were just
Mm.
so radiant and full of life. And I was like, you know what? Like, that is possible. As much as I think sometimes as a part of being an adult, of course, we wake up, we pay bills, we're going to be in an office from sunrise to sunset in the winter. There's these parts of it that almost feel like they're an inherent give and take that comes with being an adult with responsibilities. I think this also can be for you and it can be fun. And
Mhm.
there's ways to do this that really bring out some inner alignment and like the part of you that like gets excited and that inner child, like that's still there.
Mhm.
And like the people who tell you that you're just going to start feeling older and older as you get older, I'm like, I don't think that's the case because when I look at photos of me from 3, 4 years ago, or even like read my journals from 3, 4 years ago, I can tell you that me being in a much more aligned path has unlocked so much more inner youth and just zest for life and just
Mm.
true intrigue by it all.
You just wanna absorb so much, right?
I think there's a version that felt like if you did one thing, you had to stay in that forever.
Mm.
Allowing myself the space to explore other paths just is a whole different view on life because life doesn't have to be one career for 50 years. 'Cause
Absolutely.
it really does end up changing.
That reminds me a lot of, The Alchemist. Have you ever read The Alchemist?
I haven't yet.
Excellent book. When you put your dreams and your vision out in the world, basically the whole world will align and everything will align on your path to help you get
Hmm.
there. I take that to also mean when you're working in your purpose and you're in alignment with your gifts and your talents, if you stop fighting yourself, things will work the way they're supposed to. I'm very big on being purpose driven and feel that I have a purpose that's bigger than me. I always felt that it was there and I always felt that I was working against it. And when I stopped working so hard against it, even though it was hard to do the things I was doing, it was simultaneously easier,
They're
which is really
100.
difficult to explain to people unless you've experienced it, right?
Yeah.
I would be remiss if I didn't have you tell people what you do and how they can reach you if they're interested in consulting with you and your company, because I am terrible with greenery.
Just
But we talked about outside and basically bringing the outside in, right? Bringing life to internal spaces. Such a beautiful thing as part of what you do. Can you tell us a little bit about that before we wrap up?
Yeah, so I am the founder and CEO of Foster Spaces, and we are an interior plant design studio based here in Grand Rapids, but we serve all over the country, and we're all about creating and fostering that connection between humans and plants. So it's completely built upon the data and understanding that we as humans need connection to nature to feel our best and to really
Mm.
be enabled and supported in our environments. And so, with that, plants have been a huge part of my own mental health journey. They're always surrounding me. So, we started Foster Spaces a couple years ago as a way to further enable that connection of humans and plants. And so, we design homes and offices and really curate environments that support the occupants and the well being of them. Say you're doing a stressful task here right now. If you put plants around you, and measured your cortisol can be like 15% lower just by being around the greenery and with plants. And so I'm
That's
really
a whole
kind of,
podcast episode by itself. We
it's
need to do
oh,
that.
plants and nature well-being. It's a nerdy data
I
person, and that's
love
exactly
it.
where it brought me. And so that's what we do. We work with different organizations and businesses, and it's a lot of people who care about their people and who want to support the well-being of them. And so we get to be the middle person who bridge that connection with nature and make sure that the plant, once it's in the first day, it looks as good 2 years down the line, and that it's always looking
Yes.
good.
Yes. Well, and I love to hear that there are, dare I say, responsible employers out there who are taking into consideration the health and well being of their workforce in a way that may not be so obvious and may not make sense on the bottom line, but it really, really big picture wise does wonders for people.
Even if you're listening and I don't know, maybe you feel called to the bouquet of flowers because it's really dark and dreary out, I encourage you to also maybe pick up a plant. You know, that activity of being able to tune in and care for a plant is really deeply meditative. It also gives us a lot of really warm and fuzzy feelings, being able to provide and sustain life in our own spaces.
Mm.
You know, I think I've had some clients where they have a hard time opening the blinds. And I think even just having a plant in the room gives them another reason to open the blinds and make sure they're getting their water done. And, our needs don't vary that different from
Oh,
the plants
wow.
and the foliage. And so I think a plant is a living reminder to take care of yourself. And
Oh,
it's a really wonderful thing because it also supports us just by being around us. And so I think
that's like
as
a
a
support animal. It's a
I'm
support
like,
plant.
get a plant, get an aligned plant, send me a message. We're on Instagram or our
How can
website is
people find you? Boss,
fosterspaces.com.
what is the
Yep.
Instagram?
It'll just be right at Foster Spaces.
Mm.
Send me a message if you're ever like, oh, I need help with the plants. This is the way I live. I travel a lot or I'm never around them,
Maria, I
whatever
need you
it
to come help me
is.
with my plants. Let me just tell
Oh,
you
it's
right
I
now.
already have one for you actually to bring. I've got you.
I'm like, I'm a hot mess when it comes to plants. But I love
No.
them. I love them, but
And
we need
it's
them.
a
Yes.
journey. Some people will accidentally kill one plant and be like, oh no, like I can never have a plant again. But it's about finding a plant that lives in alignment with you and trusting that you'll find one. Like there's the Sahara Desert that has plants. We've got the rainforest with plants. We can find one in the middle that can
Oh
align
my
with your
goodness.
lifestyle. You'll hear people, they'll be like, oh, I'll start a garden, but I didn't get any vegetables from it. It was a waste. I'm like, no, but think about the time that you spent in the garden and how that benefited just simply understanding and observing the interaction that you get in the invitation to go outside. We all need as many hobbies as we can that get us off our devices and in
Mhm.
connection with the soil and with earth and with community, especially now in the time of wellness. Wellness can have so many buzzwords like, oh, red light therapy. You need these machines that like shake your legs, lymphatic drainage, all of these things. So many of these things that we need that we're getting sold. Like the original source of red light is the sun. You could get the really expensive treadmill that helps your knees, or you can go on an unpaved trail outside. you're also going to get all these other benefits. I think there's some really intentional micro changes that we can make in our lives to extract more life from the life that's around us.
Good
It's just
point to
slow it
end
down.
on. Oh my gosh, right there, you just tied it all together. Oh, thank you so much, Maria. I knew this would be fantastic.
Thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Again, I am Dr. Angela, and my guest today was Maria Zimmer. Foster Spaces is her business. If you are interested in hearing more, feel free to email me at angelalifestylemd@gmail.com. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and we'll be sharing your information in the show notes as well. So thank you again, Maria.
Thank you. Thank you so much, truly, for having me on. This was a
Yeah,
privilege. I enjoyed
thank you.
talking with you about it.
This has been another episode of The Lifestyle MD. Special thank you to Lou Musa for the show theme music, created with free photography and makeup by Janae for the cover photo. And if you enjoyed this podcast and you haven't already, please subscribe today and share with another woman who may benefit. You may also follow me on Instagram at Angela Lifestyle MD. I am Dr. Angela. Thank you for joining me today.